Hey everyone, thanks for coming. We'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute. Let some more people file in. Alrighty, well, we got one after, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. We got kind of a packed agenda today. But welcome to our fourth annual Workplace Safety Summit, Innovation to Application. And my name is Paige DeBalo, and I'm the newly promoted director for the National Safety Council, MSD Solutions Lab. I'll be your host today, and thank you all for joining us. We have a fantastic speaker lineup this afternoon, as well as some really exciting program updates to share. So let's go ahead and dive right into things. So first, we'll share a brief video about the impact of workplace musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs, and how organizations like Cargill and Wyffels Hybrids are working to address this issue. After that, we're pleased to be joined by Karl Zelik, Associate Professor at Vanderbilt University and co-founder and Chief Scientific Officer for HereAware, to discuss how pushing the boundaries of innovation can lead to greater workplace safety. Later, we're excited to hear from a panel of MSD Pledge members and MSD Solutions Lab grant recipients to discuss lessons learned from potential MSD solutions. Karl will moderate this conversation, which also includes Sheri Saskowski, Safety Manager at Wyffels Hybrids, Steve Fischer, Associate Professor and Associate Chair of Applied Research, Partnerships and Outreach at the University of Waterloo, Maricell Frazier, EHS Associate Manager at Pepsico, and Vaughn Mosley, EHS Supervisor at Pepsico. Then we'll conclude with some important updates about the lab, as well as announce this year's grant awardees. So you won't want to miss that, so be sure to stay until the end. But before moving on to the next part of today's agenda, I just wanted to say a few words. It's hard to believe that it's already been 4 years since the council launched the MSD Solutions Lab, made possible by the generous funding and support from Amazon. What began as a bold vision to tackle MSDs, the most common workplace injury, is now a thriving movement driven by research, innovation, and action. Since 2021, there's been remarkable progress. Through the Hallmark MSD Pledge initiative, nearly 250 leading organizations representing 3 million employees worldwide have committed to reducing MSDs. That's nearly 250 organizations saying loud and clear, worker well-being matters, and we're doing something about it. In fact, the lab's most recent MSD Solutions Index results show that the Pledge community is creating measurable improvements in workplace safety. Advancements include greater use of ergonomics programs, taking a proactive approach toward prevention, and increased collaboration across industries to share solutions. And yet the index also reminds us of the work ahead, especially when it comes to engaging workers directly and ensuring everyone has a voice in building a safer workplace. That's why we continue to push boundaries through research and innovation. Our Research to Solutions and MSD Solutions pilot grants not only generate insights and strategies to mitigate MSDs, but they also enable real-world application. Whether it's wearable technologies, computer vision, or exosuits, these are tools making a difference on the shop floor, warehouses, and offices every day. Later, we'll unveil the 2025-2026 grant recipients, a new cohort of innovators who will be testing and scaling solutions in their own workplaces. These pioneers are bringing the innovation to application theme to life, and we can't wait to learn from their efforts. To our partners, researchers, pledge members, and safety leaders, thank you for your dedication. It's your commitment that keeps this movement growing. And to those joining us for the first time, welcome. Whether you're here to learn, collaborate, or take the first step toward joining the MSD Pledge, you're part of a vital journey to improve lives on and off the job. And as we say at the National Safety Council, our mission is to save lives from the workplace to any place. But we also strive to ensure people can live their lives fully. That means being able to return home free from pain and injury so that folks can play with their kids, enjoy their hobbies, and thrive in every way that matters. So let's keep pushing forward together. And now, in the spirit of celebrating collective progress, I'm pleased to introduce a video highlighting 2 of our pledge members, Cargill's and Wyffels Hybrids, are turning MSD prevention into action. So let's take a look.
In the United States, a worker is injured every 7 seconds, and musculoskeletal disorders are the leading cause. Globally, these injuries affect nearly 1 in 4 people and cost employers billions annually. That's why the National Safety Council launched the MSD Pledge, a commitment to reduce these preventable injuries and protect what matters most: people. Cargill, a global company and pledge member, is putting that commitment into action.
When I started with Cargill, one of the reasons they created the corporate ergonomous positions back then was because our injury rates were very high. And musculoskeletal disorders were a significant part of those injuries, well over 50%. So we had a very clear focus. And what we've been doing over the last 14 years is just continuing to get better at implementing ergonomics and developing processes, using technology, using things to basically make sure that we continue to drive down those injuries. We're moving in a very positive direction. MSDs are quite often anywhere from 40 to 60% of the injuries that happen. And we may not think of those as significant injuries at times, but they are to the person. It's relevant to them that day and every day they have pain. So that's why ergonomics is such a critical focus, because it means that we're taking care of those people, everything that affects them on a daily basis.
Over the years, the EHS team and the Joint Health and Safety Committee has implemented programs such as the Preventative Response Program and the Active Release Therapy, which has reduced the ergonomic injuries by a significant amount.
Early reporting is key. It's key because we have a lot of mechanisms where we can help a person prevent that from getting worse, or prevent it from becoming a permanent issue for the individual. Safety is not something that has an end to it. It's something that you continually learn, you continually work through.
Pledge members like Cargill understand that preventing MSDs requires both workplace changes and scientific innovation. That's why they've partnered with researchers tackling MSD risks in new ways.
The next chapter for safety MSD prevention is going to be, in my mind, is going to be around data analytics. And it's about using more information that we can gather to understand hazards, but using those to get more predictive on how we can change jobs before anything happens. When we can find partners to work with, like the University of Waterloo, and be able to do research that is directly impactful to our plants and how we look at risks in our environment, that only makes us better. So it's all about growth. The way I look at it is we have a process that runs, and part of my job is to focus on innovation to say, how do we get better for the future?
We were really excited to have the opportunity to partner with Dave at Cargill. I think one of the best parts of my job is coming to work today, coming to work every day to work with amazing students. And what's great about organizations like MSD Labs and the research granting program is that it enables me to fund students, fund research associates to come into the lab where they get to learn more about the intricacies of MSD prevention. So I think it's a really valuable opportunity to have both the funding support and the relationships with folks like Dave to enhance student training so that these folks can go out and lead MSD prevention for generations forward.
Whether at a global company or a family-run seed producer like Wyffels Hybrids, the goal is the same: protect workers by rethinking how we prevent MSDs every day, in every setting.
Wyffels has unique challenges. As a seed corn producer, a lot of the rework that goes on at our facilities has to be done manually, taking very good care of those seeds so they're not damaged in the process. So there is a lot of handling, manually lifting bags and stacking and unstacking of pallets. So we had to come up with some really creative ways to be able to still treat the product with all the respect and care that it needed to make sure that it was a successful crop, but also keeping our employees safe and preventing workplace injuries. Ergonomic injuries were our #1 cause of workplace injuries at Wyffels year over year, so we knew that that was something that needed to be addressed.
So the culture has just blossomed as far as how we look at safety and how much we address each issue. We went from a time when we had 15 employees where you would kind of make sure you took care of yourself and others you worked around, to now having a culture where we have a safety manager who is making sure that we have met all the training criteria that we need to in order to have a safe workplace.
What began with 16 founding pledge members is now a community of nearly 250 leading organizations, representing nearly 3 million workers worldwide. Together, these companies are transforming workplace safety through research, collaboration, and a deep commitment to their people.
What really excites me, I think, is this revolution around computer science, around engineering, around nanotechnology. Work shouldn't hurt, and I think now is a really exciting time for technology and tools to help make sure work doesn't hurt.
Join this growing movement today. Take the MSD Pledge and access proven solutions and other exclusive benefits to protect your workforce at nsc.org/MSD.
Alrighty, such a powerful video. We want to give a special thanks to Cargill and Wyffels Hybrid and the University of Waterloo for not only participating in the video, but for their commitment to caring for workers and sharing their stories with us. And so next, we're going to have our distinguished guest speaker, Karl Zelik, Associate Professor at Vanderbilt University. Karl co-directs the Center for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology, which aims to improve health, mobility, and independence for individuals with disabilities. His research team also studies biomechanics and assistive devices. Karl has received several awards for his pioneering work, including the International Society of Biomechanics Promising Scientist Award and the American Society of Biomechanics Young Scientist Award. He's also co-founder and chief scientific officer of HeroWare, an industrial exosuit developer. And so with that, please welcome Karl.
All right, I think we've got that set up. Can you all see the screen?
Looks good to me. Thanks, Karl.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Paige. Thank you and all of the NSC organizers for the opportunity to participate in this summit. I absolutely loved that video, and I appreciate the work you all did to pull that together. I'd also like to thank everybody that's attending. I love this year's summit theme, innovation to application. This is a topic that really resonates with me. It's one of my favorite topics to discuss. And it's one that I've thought a lot about, one where I've honestly made a lot of mistakes, had plenty of failure and some occasional successes. So what I'd like to do today is just share some stories and some perspectives in the hopes that perhaps some of these lessons can be useful in your own innovation endeavors. So I want to start by telling a story related to a really interesting recent study from Elon University, where they found that 52% of US adults are now using large language models like ChatGPT on a weekly basis. Now, this study came out 3 months ago, and at the time, I was one of the 48% who was not using these AI tools regularly in their work. I had played around with them when they came out, but I wasn't using them, and there wasn't any particular reason I wasn't. That same month, I also found myself in a meeting with some other managers and leaders, and the topic came up of how we can encourage and incentivize the people in our organizations to explore these AI tools and these capabilities, how they might improve their work. And this was sort of uncomfortable for me because I realized, how can I encourage others to explore this new tool when I myself am not doing it? And I had to spend some time thinking about what was really holding me back. And I started reflecting, and I took the time to write down what I felt was holding me back from just trying these new tools in my daily or weekly workflow. And it turned out there were 4 main things. The first thing is I just didn't feel ready. I kept feeling like I needed to know more about which tools and how to use them. I wasn't sure of the precise benefits. There's so many different aspects to my job, and I wasn't quite sure where I would see value. I had my own routines. I had my own way of working, and it was fairly productive and had been effective for me to this point. So I was a little hesitant to change up. And honestly, I think I just feared the downside potential of potentially wasting time exploring something new that might lead to a dead end, or not knowing quite which tools to use. And I didn't really value the upside and the potential in the long term enough. Now, there was something really powerful about writing these down, because I realized that all of these are well-known and well-studied phenomenon. And to put it bluntly, they're basically all common excuses for not trying something new. The first one is called the myth of feeling ready. You never feel fully ready when you want to do something new. The second is called the fear of the unknown. Third is the status quo bias, where you just kind of keep doing what you've done in the past. And the last is called loss aversion, where you're more fearful of the downfall or the downside, and don't value enough the potential upside. So in writing these out, I realized I wasn't special. I suspect that every single person on this call struggles with at least one and probably multiple of these when you're trying new things or when you're considering new safety innovations. So these fears, these uncertainties, these are kind of always present in the beginning. My goal today is just to open up and share some of my personal struggles, some of the challenges I've encountered with exploring new things, with innovation, while also highlighting some of the successes and really the unexpected benefits that I've experienced in my career when I've been able to overcome some of these early barriers that held me back. So to finish this story, in March, I decided to commit a couple hours each week to exploring some of these new generative AI tools, experimenting, trying them out, and I've been doing this pretty consistently. And it's actually been remarkably fun and actually quite insightful and helpful. When I started, I expected these AI tools would be used for three main things. I thought I would use them as a coding assistant. I thought I would use them as a writing assistant specifically for social media. I put up a daily post about the science and technology of biomechanics and wearable tech. And I thought I would use it as a research assistant, but largely to kind of scrape together and query my own writings over the last few years between this science tech blog, scientific publications, trade articles. I've accumulated a few hundred pages worth of material, and I thought I would use it more in this way. What I came to discover is after using the tool for a few months, most of what I found most beneficial was not what I expected. I do use these tools as a writing assistant, but for a lot more than social media, for technical and planning documents, for trade articles, for interview preparation. I also use these tools as a research assistant, but not in the way I initially envisioned. And one of my favorite use cases for these tools now is as a thought partner for brainstorming, for intellectual sparring, for challenging my own reasoning. But the key is I didn't really see these benefits or other benefits until I started using the tool. And there have been additional benefits. Part of this is it's just fun to explore these new capabilities, and I wouldn't underestimate the impact of people enjoying their work. I've also found some really interesting new engagement, both with professional colleagues and also with family and friends. For instance, my 7-year-old daughter and I like to use these tools now to create prompts where we create little short stories about unicorns and axolotls and other things that she enjoys. Now, my talk today isn't actually about AI or large language models, though I would encourage you to experiment with them and try them out if you're not already using them. But what I think is that these same fears, these same barriers, we encounter anytime we want to try a new tool or try a new innovation in safety or otherwise. And in my experience, the benefits and also limitations of new tools generally only become clear after you take the first tangible steps to begin exploring them. So it's great to do some prep work, but no amount of prep reading or theorizing is going to make you feel fully ready to jump in, nor is it going to help you intuit what are going to be the best use cases or benefits for you. So there are two specific takeaways that are throughout this entire talk and are in this intro story and are going to be other stories I tell. The first of which is I think we all fear change and innovation, often for similar reasons. But I have found if you can give a name to your fears, it actually helps lessen some of their power. And if need be, share these concerns at the front end with your colleagues or your boss, and it can help you overcome some of these initial fears and barriers. The second is that I have found, in my experience, unexpected benefits are actually expected when you try new things. Now, I can't tell you exactly what they will be, but this seems to be more the rule than the exception, that once you start trying something, you may not find exactly what you anticipated, but you will probably have some beneficial learnings or some beneficial use cases from that new tool. So today's talk is really about these phenomenon and how these takeaways play out or have played out in my own experience with safety technology and ergonomics innovations. Before I go any further, let me disclose my affiliations. I wear a few different hats. So I am an engineering professor at Vanderbilt, where I direct a research lab on prosthetics and exoskeletons and wearable and assistive technologies to either help people with disabilities or to try to prevent injuries. I am also the co-founder and chief scientific officer of HeroWear, which is an occupational exoskeleton manufacturer. Within these roles, I am co-inventor on a number of different wearable and assistive device patents, some of which have been commercialized. I'm also on the board of a nonprofit called the American Bionics Project, which helps startups that are trying to develop solutions for people with lower limb disabilities. I am a member of the ASDM F48 committee that is focused on developing industrial standards for exoskeletons. And I'm currently the chair of the VA scientific subcommittee on rehabilitation, engineering, prosthetics, and orthotics. So my experience and my work really bridges across academia and industry. And honestly, I love translating science and technology and innovations into real-world applications and impacts. So I think most people would consider me to be an innovative person who works in an innovative field and who is employed in a job both at the university and in a startup where innovation is valued. And yet, even for me, innovation is hard. There are consistently these intrinsic fears and these excuses and these barriers early on. And when I look back over my career, what I've noticed is that there also always seem to be these unanticipated benefits if you can get over those early hurdles. So I'd like to share just two more stories with you from two different time points along my personal journey into the fields of occupational biomechanics and ergonomics. The first story is from about 10 years ago when I entered this field and kind of stumbled into this world of occupational exosuits, which really came after a series of failures of me trying to do something new. And then the second just happened in the last couple of years, which has been really unexpected, my understanding and appreciation for unexpected productivity benefits that come along with improvements in safety initiatives and safety technology. So this first story requires a little bit of background. I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan, where I studied mechanical engineering and biomechanical science, really focused on the lower limb. So I specialized in studying how humans walk and how we can take that learning and use it to design and develop and test better prosthetic limbs for people that are missing their lower limbs. I then went over to Italy for 2 years and I did postdoctoral research, still focused on walking, still focused on locomotion mobility, but now learning about how do we control our muscles? How does our nervous system control hundreds of different muscles in order to move, walk, run, jump, and otherwise move about our communities? So it was no surprise when I moved back to the United States in 2014 and I joined the faculty at Vanderbilt. I started a research lab focused on lower limb biomechanics. I focused on my specialty. I focused on these areas of where we could advance the field. But the truth is it was hard to branch out. Given that background, given that niche, I had a lot of the same fears of studying other parts of the body, whether that was the back or the neck or the hand. I didn't feel ready. There was a lot of unknown uncertainties, and there was some loss aversion of, am I better off just continuing to focus on this area that I've worked on before? Now, on this call, everyone has a different job. You're in different organizations. You have different backgrounds and responsibilities. You have different constraints. But I think these initial fears and these initial barriers are kind of surprisingly consistent when any of us are approaching new things or new innovations. So it took some intentional effort on my part to begin to explore this world of low back biomechanics, of wearable tech for the occupational realm. This was all very new to me, but largely driven by curiosity. I was able to kind of gradually transition into this space. And part of the reason I show this timeline is that it didn't happen overnight. Innovation, new things are generally a process. But one that ended up for me blossoming into a decade-long, a very active area of scientific research and discovery, first at the university and then in industry, and then further developed into an area of technology translation and commercialization. Now I want to focus on this early time period when I first started exploring this new area for me, and I want to move beyond the kind of sanitized, feel-good origin story and actually share with you some of the early failures. Because I think if you're going to innovate, if you're going to try something new, going in with a realistic expectation is very healthy. So some people on this call may have heard a shortened version of my background or of HeroWare's origin story, which basically entailed me as a parent to young children, suffering from some back pain. As I put it, my children destroyed my back, as parents know out there from all the lifting and bending and carrying. And I started thinking about whether we could make more practical and lower profile wearable assist devices, exoskeletal devices that would fit into my personal daily life. And this sparked some initial research at the university, and that in combination with some inbound interest from industry is what led eventually to this spin-off company, HeroWare, and to the commercialization of this technology. This story is accurate, but it's incomplete. The truth is that in the very earliest days, we were definitely interested in making exoskeletons that were less bulky and more practical, but we didn't know the initial target use case. Now, I live in Nashville, and there are lots of outdoor festivals, many of them are free or inexpensive. You just drive up, you bring some folding chairs, and you enjoy a day out with family and friends. But we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we didn't have to carry a bunch of chairs, and actually the chair was just designed into our clothing, it was designed into our pants. And so we had this idea of could we create something that's kind of like a chairless chair, which traditionally had been done with more rigid structures, but could we do it by embedding kind of soft materials and technology into clothing? For a variety of reasons, this was an absolute dumpster fire of an idea. It never got off the ground, but we learned some things about the capabilities and the limitations of designing these kind of softer, lower profile devices. Next, we thought, well, maybe sustained sitting at music festivals isn't the target use case, but what about helping older individuals who may have trouble with the sit to stand transition? Could we provide them with some support just during this one kind of dynamic transition task? Long story short, we struck out again for a variety of technical and practical reasons. This really didn't pan out, but we learned some more things. Next, we took a strong left turn and really started thinking outside the box and said, well, what if we develop some kind of wearable resistive clothing for astronauts during long duration space travel to help mitigate muscle atrophy? So typically these are individuals that have to do multiple hours of physical exercise while in space to offset muscle atrophy. We thought maybe we can create clothing where just the natural motion of moving around will give them some of that exercise that they miss while they're up in space. Yet again, another swing and a miss. At least at the time, NASA wasn't interested in the idea. It never really took off, but we kept learning new things. And it was through this process of exploring several potential applications and having several failures that in combination with some personal perspective and motivation for my own back pain, we explored this type of device, which we now call a back assist exosuit, specifically for kind of industrial and occupational purposes. And it's led to about 10 different peer-reviewed scientific publications from the university, over a dozen patents, a spin-off company, wearable technology products that are now supporting thousands of workers across the globe, and an increasing amount of longitudinal data starting to provide evidence for the long-term impacts on reducing musculoskeletal disorders and back injuries. What I really want to emphasize is that there's no straight line to get here. We had to overcome our early fears and risks and uncertainties. We had to be willing to try something new. We had to be willing to iterate and to stay curious in order to find the right applications and right uses for this new approach. So for me, there's always fear and uncertainty at the beginning, but trying new things, in my experience, typically leads to some unexpected benefits if you're willing to stick with it and iterate and stay curious. The final story is really just from the last couple of years, and it has to do with a shift in my own mindset about safety technology and the types of impacts that safety technology and safety innovation can have on both people and organizations. Now, if you are on this call and you're someone who's trained in ergonomics, and that's your background, the idea of improving safety can also improve productivity may seem obvious to you, but it wasn't for me. I spent my entire career as a biomechanical engineer and scientist, again, trying to help people with physical disabilities or trying to prevent injuries. And I really saw technology and I saw innovation through this lens. So when we first got started, to be very blunt, I thought the word productivity was kind of a dirty word. You know, early on, we didn't want workers to do more. We just wanted them to hurt less. And in many academic circles, even today, topics like boosting productivity or boosting profitability for a private company are not really looked upon favorably. So this was a very foreign concept, given my background. But after commercializing these exosuits and after the use started to gradually grow in industry, we started hearing some anecdotal feedback that workers were getting more done. Not because they were being asked to do more, not because they were required to do more, it was just kind of happening naturally. And workers were reporting being less tired and less sore while wearing the exosuits, and some of the productivity metrics were going up. Now, these were not formal controlled experiments. These were just clients reporting their observations, what I would call natural experiments in industry. And we began to get some preliminary quantitative data from multiple companies. And on one hand, it was really exciting. On the other, it was actually really troubling to me. For me, productivity was kind of like this unexplored jungle. I was never really formally trained on how to study it. I wasn't sure what we would find. I wasn't sure I was even supposed to be venturing into this space as an academic scientist. And I had a lot of these same recurring fears. I didn't feel ready. I didn't know what we were going into. I wasn't sure if it was worth the time and energy to explore this relative to doing more biomechanics testing or doing more research that's more related to the things I was really trained to focus in. But I decided to venture into this jungle, in part because I felt it was my responsibility to help understand if workers were still receiving the musculoskeletal disorder risk reduction benefits that we expected if they wore an exo and ended up being more productive. And I'm thankful I pursued this because I ended up discovering at least 3 unexpected benefits. The first of which is this ended up being a really interesting and rewarding area of scientific research. We published one scientific study last year entitled "Can Back Exosuits Simultaneously Increase Lifting Endurance and Reduce Musculoskeletal Disorder Risk?" It ended up being a surprisingly interesting but challenging research study at the intersection of human movement biomechanics, ergonomic risk modeling, and industrial work. And I feel it pushed me as a scientist and actually led to some important insights. So for example, we found that when wearing an exosuit, so the idea here is that when you bend or you lift, some of the strain, some of the load goes through the device rather than through your low back. And we can use biomechanical and ergonomic modeling to estimate how much this reduces wear and tear on your back, or what we would call micro damage to the biological tissues of your back. This is kind of a type of ergonomic risk metric. And what we found is that for one particular task, that the exo reduced this damage by about 68%. But what we could do is we could apply ergonomic modeling and say, well, what if this same individual performed 20% more repetitions? They were 20% more productive. And we were able to find through this approach that actually they still retained most of the risk reduction benefits that we had originally projected. Now, interestingly, if they gained their productivity benefit, or if they increased their productivity by lifting heavier weights, so in this case, lifting 60 pounds instead of 50, it actually fully offset the benefits of the exo. And so this type of scientific research helped inform how we train workers and how we train organizations to use exoskeletons responsibly. In short, don't make things heavier even if people are wearing exos. A second benefit from venturing into this space is that I realized that I wasn't alone, even in academia. Around the same time, there were actually multiple other universities that began studying both productivity and safety impacts of exos and found corroborating evidence, which was great. Now, what I want to emphasize is that sometimes when you're doing something new, I think our fears are exacerbated if we feel like we're the only ones or we don't know of others that are working in this space. But once you realize that other people have similar interests and are doing similar explorations, it ends up being really reassuring and helps encourage you to continue to move forward. And the third unexpected benefit that came from studying and measuring productivity, not just the biomechanics or the ergonomics, but was that we were able to help companies discover something that they didn't expect. So we've now had multiple companies who began using exos for safety and worker well-being purposes, but discovered measurable productivity benefits. And this has actually helped them gain internal and management support for their safety initiatives more quickly. So one of these was an industry-led study with one of HeroWare's warehouse clients. We tracked 40 warehouse case pickers and their typical pick rate, so that's their productivity metric, during a baseline period without an exo, during a training period where they were acclimating and ramping up the use of the exo, and then for several weeks following. And we found that exos were able to increase their productivity while also reducing worker-reported back discomfort. And so the reductions in back discomfort were the goal, but the productivity benefits ended up being this kind of added bonus. Since doing this industry research, several other companies have come out and shared some of their own productivity and injury data. Some of these were discussed at a panel earlier this year at ProMat. For instance, Whole Foods rolled out exosuits as a part of a broader safety initiative and measured 100% decreases in their strain and sprain injuries over the first year, along with significant financial benefits due to productivity gains. Meanwhile, Amerisure, who was a previous NSC grant recipient, worked with one of its clients over a multi-month study and measured simultaneous reductions in back discomfort and increases in productivity. So if you're interested in this topic and this kind of evolving evidence related to productivity and safety, there's a nice Forbes article written by Bobby Marinoff, who runs the Exoskeleton Report website. that discusses the latest evidence. But what I want to emphasize is that really for a number of these different companies, again, they went in focused on one area, focused on safety, focused on well-being, but these additional unexpected benefits, either in terms of productivity or morale boost or turnover, ended up being unexpected and beneficial. So despite my own initial fears about studying productivity, it has been really quite impactful and rewarding. So to close out, I just want to reiterate that I think we all fear change. We all fear innovation, often for similar reasons, but naming those fears can help you get over the initial barriers and at least give you an opportunity to start to explore some new tools, some new safety initiatives, some new safety innovations. And second is just that unexpected benefits are expected when you try new things. You won't know what they are fully at the beginning, but if you make time and space to explore and you're willing to stay curious and to iterate, you'll be surprised how much of an impact and how beneficial new things can be. So I hope you all will stick around for the longer panel discussion where this fantastic panel will provide more insight and inspiration and some actionable ideas for navigating from safety innovation to application. Thank you all so much for your time and your attention.
Yeah, thanks so much, Karl, for sharing there. And so now we're going to keep this conversation going, like Karl mentioned, and we're going to welcome our panelists to join us. And so we have Maricell, Vaughn, Sheri, and Steve. So welcome. And Karl, I'll turn it back over to you to moderate the panel discussion.
Excellent. Thanks. All the panelists, appreciate you hopping on and being willing to share your time and insights. I think I'd like to start off with Maricell. So Pepsico won one of the last year's pilot grant awards. Congratulations on that. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about your organization and the project that you applied for and what you did in this pilot grant?
Absolutely. Thank you, Karl. And first, to thank the National Safety Council for the grant, of course, and the opportunity to talk about it at this forum. For the project, we were partnered with a company named Life Booster. In this project, we collected and analyzed ergonomic risk data from 4 of our work groups: maintenance team in our production area, our liquids, our salts, and our sanitation team. The way we collected the data was through Life Booster's wearable smart sensors. We collected over 800 hours of data that was loaded into an analytical platform loaded with trusted ergonomic risk standards from all over the world. And the result was that it was able to detect for us not only ergonomic risks, but also heat stress potential, as well as hand and arm vibration. So a lot of great outputs from these wearable smart sensors. And from the identification of these risks, we were then able to identify some mitigation strategies to address each of these. So really a great project for us.
Awesome. Well, that's a great summary. As a follow-up to that, I'm curious, what made you apply for the NSC grant? And were there any fears or barriers you had to overcome, either within yourself or within your organization, in order to get this project started?
I think there are 4 things for me that stand out in terms of how we were able to and why we were able to apply for this grant. Number 1, of course, the opportunity to work with the National Safety Council, very trusted and sound, in our profession. Secondly, of course, the tech involved. I think many of us know that historically, ergonomic assessments are more like bringing in a consultant where they kind of eyeball what's going on and then write you a report. This was the opportunity to get some really objective data in a relatively quick manner for the quantities that we were, uploading. And then thirdly, it was very timely because we had frontline interest and concerns around ergonomics in specific areas. And to be able to address those quite quickly with objective data was a plus. And then lastly, personally for me, there was an element to the assessments, or really around the mitigation strategy development, that includes what they call learning groups or learning teams. It's part of human and organizational performance or safety differently. And it involves the engagement of frontline SMEs and others to formulate those mitigation strategies, which for us was a plus in terms of employee engagement. So really, those were the top reasons why. But some of the barriers, even though we have a good culture, one of the things that was concerning was making sure that not only our management but our frontline, that they were bought in and understood and trusted us to try something new and different that they had never been exposed to before. Were there going to be concerns about Big Brother and what the sensors, what other data the sensors might be collecting or not collecting? So this was a concern for us, but I think because of our culture, because of the trust, because of the comms that we purposefully developed, we were able to overcome those potential barriers and potential fears. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that and sharing a window into both the tailwinds and headwinds involved. And we're going to circle back a little bit later to talk about strategies for getting employee engagement and buy-in. For now, I'd like to move over to Steve. So Waterloo was an inaugural recipient of one of the Research to Solutions grants from NSC. So congrats on that. I was hoping you could share a little bit about what your project entailed and maybe some of the most significant outcomes of the project to date.
Thanks, Karl, and thanks for a wonderful keynote presentation as well. So we were honored to be one of the inaugural recipients, and we worked really closely with Cargill. And the question was really around computer vision, or using your smartphone to record video and have that drive your ergonomic analysis. And there's a number of products kind of emerging on the market. So there was some questions bubbling up about, are there, what are some of the differences between the product offerings? Are there guidance? Does this work for fast work, slow work? Does it matter? Is it just, can I just point and shoot and I have an answer? And is that good? Or do I have to be careful about angle of capture and these sorts of things? So our project was really trying to help demystify computer vision. So we wanted to help understand and provide guidance to users. And you asked about some key findings. And some of the guidance is that there's a lot of benefit to computer vision. And I think Maricell spoke a little bit about the ability to capture data, and you get different types of data, whether it's life boost or computer vision. We have this time component of data that is really important and useful, but it's not point and shoot. Most of the systems we find work best when you can see the individual. So AI doesn't mean we can make up for when I can't actually see a person or see what they're doing. And it usually works best when you record perpendicular to the primary movement. So if I was kind of turning in my chair and moving from the side, the camera view you now have would be best to kind of understand my shoulder elevation. And the data is quite different as you move your camera angle around a worker. So the data you get, does vary quite a bit. And what we found is that optimal angle is really perpendicular. So that was the key take home. The other interesting piece is, I think, the market is really driving some quality products. So regardless of who the product offering is, if you're recording from kind of the optimal angle, we didn't see a lot of difference. There are obviously, each product offering has their unique value propositions and attributes for users. But in terms of data, the data is sound from an optimal perspective, regardless of the product. So I think that's an important message for users that are looking into this space, is that, if you're really interested in data quality, it's probably less about the product and more about how you capture the information that's going into the computer vision.
Steve, those are some really good insights. I love how you're connecting the scientific research to the applications there. In the process of your project so far, have there been any unexpected results or any really surprising challenges to you?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things, and I think this comes back to, I had a great conversation with Dave at Cargill, and we were kind of talking through some of the preliminary results. And I was saying to Dave, I said, just shoot from the optimal angle. And Dave said, well, I have a wall there and I have a machine there. And, what if I can't do that? And I think the interesting observation for us is that one of the differences across product offerings was how the data looked as you moved away from that primary sort of what I'll call optimal viewing angle. And we noticed some pretty big differences. So where everybody kind of said the same thing, if I used, four different programs, they would all say the same thing from the optimal angle. But as I started getting out of access or, where the AI had to make decisions about, well, I can't quite see this anymore, so I got to estimate, there was a lot of deviation. So the unexpected finding for us was really how different products deal with what I'll call missing data. If I can't see something, what's the choices that they use? Do you try to use a numerical method of sort of fitting a pattern or a curve? Do you make a guess using some other estimate? Do you say, nah, I don't know, I don't actually trust this data, so I'm not going to give you any information because I don't want to give you wrong information. And there's different choices that can be made there. So my advice from that unexpected finding is, if you're purchasing in this space, have conversations about what happens, like what's happening with data when the camera can't see everything it needs to see to make a good estimate about what's happening.
Super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we're going to jump over to Sheri. Congrats on your Hollywood debut. That newly released MSD Pledge video was fantastic, and Steve, you as well. That was really good. We were able to see a snapshot of the great work that you're doing at Wyffels to keep workers safe. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about which innovations you have trialed at Wyffels and maybe what spurred your exploration into trying new safety initiatives.
Sure. Well, thank you, Karl, and thank you for the National Safety Council for providing this platform today to kind of talk about our story at Wyffels. Just to give you a little context and background about the company, it is a small to mid-sized company in central Illinois. We produce seed corn for the Corn Belt in about 5 states. I started in November of 2021, and when I first started, one of the things that really interested me in the position was the fact that I was going to be able to create a safety management system from the ground up. Because it was a smaller family-owned business, they really hadn't had a robust safety program in the past, but they had experienced tremendous growth in the past decade. Just since I've started alone, we've created 100 new positions within the company. So it's been an incredible experience to be able to do all that from scratch. And that also kind of led to a great environment for embracing new technology. The company realized that they needed to, their technology had to move as fast as their growth. And so this was the point where they were building into a new ERP upgrade. So it was the right place and the right time for this. We needed to find a really good, effective way of managing ergonomic injuries. One of the first things that I did, and most safety professionals will do when they start a new job, is to kind of dig into the data and find out where those injuries are coming from. And what I found was that we really didn't have a centralized place of keeping all of those records other than the workman's compensation dashboard through our carrier. And that didn't give us a whole lot of insight into near misses and first aids and things that didn't require doctor's visits. So one of the first things I had to do was find out what we already had in place that we could utilize. So using our intranet and SharePoint was helpful. And then I had to find a good way to gather reliable data. So one of the very first things I did was find an incident management system that worked for us. I trialed several different providers and came to the conclusion that Velocity EHS was going to work best for us. There's tons of great programs out there, but that's the one that we went with in 2022, in January of 2022, about a month and a half after I started. And the leadership embraced the technology. And again, with this new ERP coming into place, it was the right time to do something like that. So we got all of that data entered into Velocity so that I could really drill down and find out where those injuries were coming from. And what we found out was that ergonomic injuries were absolutely our #1 cause. And 99% of those ergonomic injuries were our part-time seasonal folks, and that was due to manual material handling. So that gave us a really good insight into what we needed to do as far as reducing those injuries. And then, so the ergonomic software that came into place, that was just late last year. We started trialing different ergonomic software providers, and we went with Tumeki. That was the one that seemed to work well with our application after a couple of different calls. And so we started using that in November of 2024. So that's kind of what we've been doing, kind of the background as to how we got started with the innovations that we've been doing.
That sounds awesome. Thanks for unpacking a lot of that. It sounds like a really exciting and dynamic environment, and can completely understand the need for building out new processes and trying new safety innovations or initiatives that can scale with your company. We're going to hop over to you, Vaughn. Thanks for joining us as well from Pepsico. Could you share with us any major successes or maybe unexpected lessons or benefits that came out of your pilot grant? Vaughn, I don't think we can hear you. Nope, cannot hear anything. Maybe there's some issue. Your mute is definitely off, but maybe some issue with the mic input. Maybe I can jump one question further and then circle back to you on this one, see if we can get that debugged. Katie or Paige, not sure if we could give Vaughn a little bit of assistance there. But why don't I leapfrog over back to Steve? You know, as an innovator in the academic space, I was hoping you could share with us a little bit about emerging trends you're seeing in innovation, specifically for MSD prevention. And maybe to be a little more specific, what are the biggest differences that you see now versus 5 years ago?
Yeah, and I think, you know, Maricell and Sheri and Dave in the video probably spoke to this. I think the biggest thing I see that's changing is data. So Maricell, I mentioned, you know, you were talking about your program and implementing the life booster technologies and talking about, you know, historically the ergo consultant kind of came in, eyeballed some things. And the eyeball term is actually really telling, because so much of what we've been doing is kind of eyeballing, right? Like we have a checklist rule and we kind of like, the angle's here, and we sort of go and make some decisions. But I think what's really changing is with the technology landscape, we have an abundance of data. And to Sheri, your point about, you know, using that, even the injury data, and getting a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit beyond, you know, tracking so-and-so got hurt. Here was kind of, I wrote a cause in the box, but I really didn't do a lot of deep dive, a lot of digging. But we have a lot more data. Now, the challenge with this, I think, is how do we separate which parts of this data are actually useful for decision making and which parts of the data are just noise in the system. So I think that's the opportunity we have. But in the next 5 years, you know, I keep joking that my job is to train health and safety professionals, train ergonomists. And I keep joking that, you know, I have to brush up on my computer science skills, because now I'm actually training data scientists that happen to be, you know, some of my students are out in sports teams as sports performance consultants. But now we're sort of training the same concept in ergonomics. So I think that's something interesting. And I'd be curious, actually, if I could ask maybe Sheri and then Maricell, like, what are your thoughts in terms of how you're using the data, and what are some of the challenges you see, if I can take this moment to be biased, and like, what are your pain points with data? What's good, what's bad?
I guess I can start. I'm not an ergonomist. I've been practicing EHS for 30 years, but I'm no medical doctor either. And the data, the amount of data that came out was a little overwhelming. And like, you know, like when you get that new phone and it has all these features and you're like trying to figure out how it works and how to best leverage it, that kind of thing. But of course, with the assistance of the Life Booster staff, helping us understand the significance of the data collected, how to interpret it, and then how to leverage that into these risk reduction strategies, I found to be quite helpful, because otherwise I think it would have taken me much longer to figure it out, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and I think we had at Wyffels the exact opposite issue. So I didn't have much data to go by when I first started. We had, some anecdotal information that I got from employees. We had what I could glean from our workman's compensation carrier from previous incidents, but we definitely weren't collecting near misses or first aids or anything that didn't result in a doctor's appointment. So if somebody had a sore back or a sore shoulder after the day was done, we had no way of knowing when that was happening, how that was happening. So that was a big challenge in getting started, was just to figure out where is all of these injuries coming from.
Yeah, and Karl, I know you just maybe on a follow-up, and we'll tie back to Vaughn here. I think one of the other interesting insights as we're talking about all this data, I often think of kind of MSD risks or hazards as a pie. And, if we were doing classic rule of looking at a posture and sort of good, bad, red, green, yellow, I think we like the colors. We're probably looking at like a slice of that pie, but there's a whole other portion of the pie that we actually don't know anything about. And so what the other exciting thing is, with this data, can we see, or maybe eat, if we want to use the analogy, can we eat more of the pie? Can we actually capture other aspects of risk that maybe we haven't even known to look for in the past? So I think that will be exciting as well. And Maricell, I'm curious to hear more in the future about all of the interesting things you're doing with Life Booster. But sorry, Karl, back to you.
Never apologize for that. It's part of what we want with the panel, and I was actually going to bridge into something exactly like that. I think this point of data is really interesting. And I don't know the numbers at each of your organizations, but it almost feels like years ago there were 10 hours of data, and now there's 1,000. And when you look out in the future, we're going to be at 100,000 or 1 million, and it's going to keep growing. And I think that's part of the reason that we have to embrace and learn how to use these tools now, because if we don't figure out how to do it at the current scale, the data is going to keep growing and it's going to become more difficult. So I think we need people that are leaning into innovation, sharing what they're learning, and being candid about what we can do right now and the things that we don't know. Vaughn, are you back with us? Oh no. Still, it seems to still be the same bug, which I think is likely a microphone issue on your end. Sometimes the Zoom connects to something else. All right, we're going to figure this out and get this working before the end. But I'm going to jump back over to Sheri and again ask if the NSC folks can help Vaughn find his voice. Let's see. Okay, so we talked about data with Steve and inputs for Maricell and Sheri. Sheri, let's talk a bit about culture. Obviously, this can have a huge impact on whether any new safety initiative is successful or not. Can you tell us more about the workplace culture at Wyffels, and maybe specifically, what are some successful strategies that you have found to encourage the worker buy-in and encourage that collaboration in the innovation process?
Absolutely. Culture is my favorite thing to talk about, because that is the primary influencer on how successful or not your safety programs are going to be. If Wyffels had taken the National Safety Council's maturity assessment, if you folks haven't seen that yet, I highly recommend that you go out and do that. If we had taken that 3 years ago, Wyffels would have been what was considered a safety explorer, meaning the company understood the importance of adhering to safety compliance standards, but also viewed safety as a roadblock to getting the job done, or as a cost of doing business. So fear of consequences also kind of played into that safety culture and not reporting incidents. So one of the other things that I put into place very early on was a safety incentive program. So we encourage and reward early reporting of hazardous conditions or unsafe behaviors. And they have employees have a direct line this way to leadership to talk about their safety concerns in their workplace, and they're actively involved in their own safety. So they're submitting these concerns, these hazardous conditions, unsafe behaviors, or even suggestions. Maybe they saw something at a previous employer that they liked. We've had several employees who had stretching programs elsewhere that, wanted to share that with us. So we were able to provide a mechanism for them to report those things so that we could act on that right away through our incident management system. So now I would consider us a safety innovator, systems driven. We have shared ownership for safety and are focused on proactively preventing those incidents and continuous improvement. So, and then over time, as that culture changed, as people got used to submitting these things and realized that there was not a consequence, but in other words, an encouraging or a reward, I should say, a reward for reporting those incidents, those behaviors and those conditions. They could win actual cash, Wyffels gear, all kinds of fun stuff. So then as that culture started to embrace that, those unsafe behaviors and unsafe conditions started to stick out like a sore thumb instead of being something that wasn't discussed or wasn't addressed. And employees were no longer afraid to report these things. The other thing that really helped me as a safety professional, one of the things that I learned early on in my career, was that it always helps to find that naysayer, that non-believer that doesn't believe they can make a difference. In my personal experience, it's always been a maintenance guy or somebody that's been grumpy and just said, you're just getting in my way. So find those people and make them your safety champions. Explain the why we're doing the things that we're doing. Get their help, encourage them to help us and make a real change. Make them a safety champion. And I found that if you give them some responsibilities in that vein, before you know it, they really do embrace it. And then they get on board and then kind of everyone else kind of follows along.
Awesome. That was a great tips and advice. And I'm curious, Maricell or Vaughn, could you maybe expound on that? Are there any additional things that you all do that you found really helps with that initial buy-in? And maybe even take it a step further. And obviously you can get workers bought into the idea of safety innovation, but then what are the keys to kind of long-term adoption and sustaining the positive impacts after something new has been introduced?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you so much. As I wanted to mention earlier, definitely applaud National Safety Council as well as you, Karl, and your efforts in ensuring that we have sustainable solutions for workers and their ergonomic hazards that they face day to day. If I could just share really quickly our journey that we had here at PepsiCo Arlington, some of the major successes that we had, that we learned along the way. We risk assessed our work alongside our engineering team. And one example was us being able to go back and redesign one of our conveyor lines to bring the railing a lot closer to the employee so they wouldn't have to overextend themselves. Through working with Life Booster and the ergonomic learning teams and the support of the leadership team, being committed to seeing us through the entire journey, we were able to also notice that our sanitation workers, those technicians were essentially the unsung heroes at our site. Because they worked on a third shift, we didn't have a whole lot of oversight in terms of realizing that they were working in a lot of awkward positions as well as odd posture from day to day. Through that data that we were able to collect, we were able to make some data-driven decisions and finding safer ways for the population group to work. So I definitely thank you. Otherwise, we wouldn't have probably never noticed that if we didn't have that data to help us with that. And just going back to what you mentioned earlier, I believe overall, we developed trust with our frontline employees, as well as with I think it helped bridge the gap with our frontline supervisors as well, for them to see that we also had the courage to care about them and see them through anything that was brought to our attention through a safety good catch, and just taking it a step further to implement innovation and new technologies. I thought it just helped us try to drive that change management aspect to our workers in terms of not just focusing on the equipment, but on the individual themselves.
Vaughn, I really love that. I think when we hear the term safety innovation, the first T word that comes to mind is technology, but I think it really should be trust, right? Like that's the basis of all of this, regardless of what the innovation is. So I'm glad that you highlighted that, and that seems to be one of the key things to really long-term sustained impact, right? Is that people continue to trust the organization, they trust the process, and they trust what's being put in place is in their best interest. Okay, let's jump back over to Steve. I imagine that you run across organizations that are uncertain or potentially fearful about implementing new safety innovations. And they may have unrealistic expectations, either expectations that are way too high or ones that are too negative. In your experience, what are some of the common barriers to companies considering new safety innovations or new safety initiatives? And maybe what would you say to these organizations that might be uncertain or fearful about even trialing something new in order to potentially help protect workers and prevent MSDs?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it actually ties into the conversation we're having around trust and culture and what this means for many companies. And it's funny, we were just having this conversation over the weekend, and I think somebody made the statement that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it's interesting, right? The best laid process, the best laid plans, if the culture is not right, and some of this falls apart. So the context, I think, is first and foremost. If there's a culture of innovation, a culture of creativity, a trust, those are really important. I think one big piece around innovation, and this kind of came out, I think, Vaughn, you mentioned it, where I've seen success is when these are employee first. So employees are in, they're sort of co-creating, or the workforce is helping to co-create what that pilot program might look like. They have a skin in the game, so to speak, right? Which comes back to trust. Like management trusts that the workers can provide important feedback. Workers trust that their feedback and things will shape. We actually heard a really interesting horror story of innovation where a management team with a group we were working with implemented technology, explored a bunch of technologies, implemented, and then it got almost no use. And we asked, well, like, why did it get no use if your workers said it was good in the pilot? Oh, we didn't actually have them in the pilot. Well, that was probably a problem. So a lot of words here, but I think that culture, first and foremost, having workers engaged in the process is really key. And then I think the other piece is, and Karl, you did a really good job of outlining this in your talk. I think having the freedom, I don't want to say freedom to fail, but having the freedom to learn. Like innovation's not easy. It doesn't work right out of the can. And there's a bunch of unexpected benefits that we don't know what we don't know when we go into this. So having companies I've worked with that have a little bit of space and a little bit of freedom, again, I don't want to say to fail. We're not failing, we're learning. They have some freedom to try something and to learn from that and to iterate and to try to get better. That's been a real benefit. And sometimes it's a small agile team, somebody that maybe is in maintenance that can kind of quick ready some prototypes, a couple workers that are really familiar with the problem space, maybe somebody that has access to a little bit of purse strings. So if there are some financial resources, and away they go, and they kind of just try things in small little clusters and learn. So I kind of adopt that sort of lean startup. If folks are into the business literature, that lean startup mindset, I think, is really useful.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I'm actually going to use that to bridge directly over to Sheri. I completely agree. Innovation benefits are often not immediate. They require some experimentation, some iteration. There's going to be some dead ends, and there's going to be some surprises, sometimes positive and sometimes negative. But maybe, Sheri, in your organization, what are some of the challenges that you all encountered? What are some of the iterations that you had to work through? And what advice might you have for organizations who are trying to also navigate from, hey, we're interested in this and it seems like it has potential, but it's going to take some work to get to the point where we actually have it integrated into our workflow in a way that's truly beneficial and sustainable?
Sure. Wyffels, they have, as I've mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of growth going on right now. And with this new ERP system that's getting put into place, there's a lot of competing priorities. So our management teams and our supervisors, that are even our floor supervisors, are tied up quite a bit in these meetings. Going over how they're going to do inventory management that's now being automated that hadn't been in the past. Sales ordering, all of that is now automated through the computer system that we're putting into place, which wasn't done before. So not only are there competing priorities with a lot of technology, but I think there's also some tech overload. I think people are just like, you're putting all these apps in my hand, and what am I going to do with all this? How do I keep track of it? Can I at least get the same password for some of these things? So there's a lot of that. Another thing too that was a challenge is just trying to bridge the gap between what I'd like to call the old guard culture. So you've got some people that have a lot of tenure with Wyffels. They've been there for decades, and it's always kind of been done the same way. And you're asking them to now try out new things. One of the biggest benefits that I've found is that some of our newer employees, since we do have so many new employees, they've come from other employers where they've had a robust safety program in place. So they're kind of able to bridge that for me, saying, hey, no, this isn't that weird. You should have seen where I came from before. They do a lot more than that. So there's some of that goes into it. And so, just making sure that they're not bringing with those old, that they're not imparting those old bad habits onto our newer employees that are much more used to a more robust safety culture than where Wyffels was in the past. And I would say some of the things that I would recommend is just don't get stuck in decision mode. Set out specific goals and criteria for the trials. Get a team together of stakeholders. So when I was looking at ergonomic software, I was looking for, I was asking IT, is this something that we can support through the ERP at some point? Our production folks, what does this look like? When we're using this out on the floor, do we even have iPads or things that we can use so that the supervisors have this technology at their fingertips too? It shouldn't just be me that has access to that. And there's other things too. You want maintenance involved in some things that you might need to put into place. Remember that it is an investment and it requires frequent evaluation and continuous improvement. So I would just say, don't shy away from criticizing your own work. I think Karl touched on this in his keynote. Give yourself a little run for the money. Maybe you have a bias that you're not aware of, and then get feedback from everybody that you're working with. Have them weigh in, and don't be afraid to receive that constructive criticism, because in the long run, it'll just make your programs much stronger.
Excellent. Thanks. Vaughn, circling back to the question from the beginning, it's kind of in this vein of, did you all experience any unexpected course corrections or unexpected benefits during the implementation of your pilot project, Grant?
Yes, I think a lot of the unexpected benefits that we learned were geared around just those population groups that we overlooked. As well as just realizing better ways of working. Through working with Life Booster, we were able to go back and take a look and realize that our employees are essentially industrial athletes. That was one thing that I enjoyed looking at throughout the process, and also relaying that message across to our team leaders as well. One of the things that we try to employ here is to not only have it coming from the EHS team, but to also have that messaging come from our frontline supervisors, because we know that they have the most impact on the employees as they see them day to day, whether that was stretching, incorporating the new techniques of working that we were able to identify with Life Booster, and then just being able to incorporate not only the lessons learned from Life Booster, but also the lessons that we learned from the exoskeleton pilot that we were able to be a part of as well. And making those tools available and those resources available to all of the employees to utilize at their discretion. So definitely thankful to be a part of it.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Okay, we've got about 6 minutes left in this panel discussion. I'm going to throw one more question over to Steve, and then ask for some closing wisdom and advice from each of you. So Steve, one of the challenges that we know about with new innovations is there's kind of never as much large scale long term evidence as any of us would like. Right, a new safety tool or a new capability that's developed in the last 5 years is never going to have 20 years of evidence behind it. So early on, can you talk a little bit about your thought process as someone that's in both the scientific research world and in the industry world? How do you separate the hype from the science-backed innovations? How do you find those things that have real potential? Can you just kind of talk us a little bit through how you deal with emerging technology and evolving evidence?
Yeah, it's a great question, Karl, and I think probably particularly timely now when it seems, Sheri, to your point, almost like tech overload. So many things are happening so quickly. So I think it's a really timely question. My thinking on this was really shaped by a researcher from Sweden that's recently retired, and was popular in the public health sphere. But there's the concept of efficacy and effectiveness is kind of how I think of these. So efficacy is kind of what I do in the lab. We take a product or we take a solution, and in the best case scenario where we're nice and sanitized in the lab, and Karl's some of the graphics showed all the sensors, we can measure all these biological signals, and we can generate data to say, conceptually, does this innovation, does it hold water? Is it changing some of the biological things we think it's changing? And I think that's good information on which to build some trust. To Karl's point, we're not going to know if it's going to prevent what percentage of injuries it's going to prevent until it gets out and adapted. So I think when I'm evaluating technology, what is there in terms of efficacy? Like best case scenario, controlled, maybe it's research, maybe it's like an early stage pilot. Does it pass the sniff test? Is there some evidence that like this is going to work? It's going to hold water. After that, now I think we're dealing with all the things we've been talking about. We're dealing with culture. We're dealing with, do I have teams that have the space and freedom to try things? And then at that point, Sheri, I think you made a really good point about not getting caught in decisioning. So when we're implementing these technologies, what am I using? What are the metrics that I'm using to decide, yes, we're going to continue or we're going to expand this program? And I would argue that MSD reduction might actually not be the best primary measure because it's a lagging indicator. If somebody gets hurt, I've actually waited too long. I want to prevent things upstream. So being smart about how we use information about, do workers like it? Do they wear it? Do they wear it next week? Do they wear it the week after? Or do we use it the week after? So just things like engagement, adherence. There's a lot of research around the adoption of ergonomic innovations. And time again, worker perception of ergonomic benefit comes out key. So, get that perception, get that feedback from workers. That's really good. What's going to drive long-term, quote unquote, effectiveness. It actually works in the culture, in the environment, in the context that you're applying the innovation. And until we try that, we never know the answer to that particular question because every culture, every workplace is going to adapt an innovation a little bit differently to their system. So hopefully that kind of gets at what you're going. Sheri and Maricell, I know we have some key points here, but curious quickly on your thoughts on how, Sheri, with your program, how are you measuring? How are you making decisions? What are some of the metrics?
Sure. So when I was looking at different technologies, you have to have a thorough understanding of your organization and the culture. So you have to know, what does this solution actually solve a significant problem for us? Or is it just bright and shiny? Is it just something that's really cool to have? Because there's a lot of that stuff out there. But does it solve a problem that is going to make an impact in the workforce? And do we have the infrastructure for it? Do we have the support with, do we have Wi-Fi support or IT support or whoever in the organization needs to help us out with that? And then how sustainable is that solution? What does leadership support it and help drive it? And if someone isn't, wearing their wearables, what are the consequences? Is there a management system for those people that are not going to be, or that don't follow those rules or those guidelines? Is there some kind of recourse for that?
Yes, and then in terms for us at Pepsi, our focus has always been around risk reduction. So if we find some technology or innovation that aligns with our risk reduction efforts, we can pilot it to find the value. And if it does produce that value, then we can leverage that across the rest of the enterprise for which it is a good fit.
All right, this has been a great discussion. We're going to go ahead and land the plane now. We're going to do a really quick round robin. I'm going to ask each of you to give one piece of advice, but the scenario is you feel so passionate about this piece of advice that you're putting it on a bumper sticker. So I need one punchy piece of advice that you're going to either give to organizations who are actively looking to trial new safety innovations, or maybe those that are kind of sitting on the fence looking at some of these new advances, but not sure if they want to jump in. So could we start with Vaughn with what's your one piece of closing advice?
My one piece of closing advice for organizations would be continue to keep searching, keep looking, and never give up on innovation, because I think that's definitely the way ahead. And there's always a solution out there and someone working hard behind the scenes to find better ways and safer ways of working.
Awesome. Thanks, Vaughn. How about you, Sheri?
Leadership support is so critical. You have to have buy-in from the top down, or none of this can work.
Love it. Okay, Maricell.
I'm going to go with total employee engagement, and don't let perfect get in the way of good.
Excellent. Steve, bring us home.
I'm going to follow Maricell. It's all about people. Include workers early and often.
Love it. Okay, get those bumper stickers printed. I want to see those on your vehicles. Thank you all. Okay, thanks so much for the wonderful panel, and I will turn things back over to Paige to close out the summit.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys. I thought that was great, and I'm going out to buy my bumper stickers now. So thanks for all that great advice and just a really great panel discussion. And I'll jump us back over just to share some kind of our closing pieces here, but to also give you guys a couple updates. So thanks again, for joining for this celebration, of innovation and progress and partnerships. 4 years ago, the MSD Solutions Lab was just getting started, and today it's really a force for workplace change, mobilizing research, advancing practical solutions, and uniting organizations across industries to tackle the most common workplace injury of musculoskeletal disorders. So thanks for everyone for chatting through lots of ways to innovate and mitigate MSD risks in that panel discussion. One of the most impactful ways that we do some of this, though, and pushing innovation is through the Research to Solutions and MSD Solutions pilot grant programs. And so I'm thrilled to announce that this year, the National Safety Council is awarding $300,000 in grants to the 2025-2026 recipients. And that brings our total investment across 3 cycles to nearly $850,000, a milestone made possible through our continued partnership with Amazon. And these grants empower academic institutions, researchers, and employers to explore and test groundbreaking strategies for MSD prevention. The lab also recently released findings from our inaugural 2023-2024 grant recipients, which showed meaningful and actionable insights. Academic researchers explored innovative tools like AI-based ergonomic risk detection and predictive models to evaluate MSD hazards. And at the same time, through the pilot grant programs, employer-led pilots tested wearable exosuits and advanced computer vision to improve manual materials handling. And these projects not only validated promising technologies, but help us generate practical guidance that can be scaled across industries. And these results confirm kind of what we've long believed and what we've been talking about today, but innovation and collaboration are really key to preventing MSDs. And they also remind us that while progress is being made, we need to continue investing in future workplace safety, and that starts now. And so I'm excited to introduce the 2025-2026 Research to Solution Grant recipients. We have the University of Waterloo, which is a second-time R2S grant recipient, who will use innovative MSD risk assessment tools to better leverage data from emerging technologies. We have Auburn University, who will be testing a new plant layout organizational tool for MSD control and mitigation. Texas Tech University will assess 3D printed head and neck rests for reduced discomfort during overhead work. And George Mason University will develop a smartphone computer vision technology for real-time movement assessment to prevent MSDs and emergency responders. So congratulations to all of those grant recipients. I'm also pleased to announce the 2025-2026 pilot grant recipients who will partner with technology innovators to test real-world solutions. And so Dormakaba will partner with Dorn to train employees in MSD risk reduction best practices to improve overall wellness. Cargill will be working with MacuSafe to explore how technology can be used to create risk profiles and provide early hazard identification. Panduit will be teaming up with Stroma Vision to help reduce upper extremity MSD risks in cable management and electrical connectivity manufacturing operations. Northwell Health is collaborating with HAPO to validate the benefits of a surgeon exoskeleton in reducing upper limb strain during long, complex surgical procedures. And finally, US Foods will be partnering with IntelliSafe Analytics to identify lifting stress incidents at manufacturing facilities and delivery sites. And so just a big congrats to all of this year's awardees. We're really excited to see how all of this work will continue advancing MSD prevention. And before we close out, I want to share a little bit more about recent and upcoming efforts from the MSD Solutions Lab. And so first and foremost, we're really thrilled to announce the launch of the MSD Solutions Commons, which is a new open access platform designed to accelerate MSD prevention through shared knowledge. This platform features case studies, solutions, and research from industry leaders, ergo experts, and safety and health professionals. And it's a growing resource to help organizations learn from some of this real-world experience like we heard about today and drive innovation. And so we really invite you to explore and contribute to the evolving hub of information housed in the MSD Solutions Commons. And that QR code can take you in to browse some of those case studies and see how you can further engage through the platform. And later this summer, we'll publish new research on frontline worker perceptions of MSD risks, which we heard about the importance of involving frontline workers before from our panel. These insights are going to help employers better understand how workers experience MSD mitigation efforts and where opportunities exist to improve them. And before the end of the year, we'll be releasing our third annual MSD Solutions Index report, capturing key trends and takeaways from organizations that have previously joined the MSD Pledge. And so a special thanks to all of you in the audience who might have participated in the MSD Solutions Index and are featured in that report. And lastly, we hope that you'll join us for the 2025 NSC Safety Congress and Expo that takes place in September in Denver. So that's September 15th through 17th. We'll be highlighting last year's grant recipients through a couple sessions at Congress and bringing back our ever-popular Safety Innovation Challenge, which continues to inspire and elevate new ideas for MSD prevention. And as we wrap up today's summit, I encourage you to sign the MSD Pledge if you haven't already. This commitment provides organizations with exclusive offerings such as access to pilot grants, benchmarking opportunities, office hours, and a community of like-minded organizations. So please, you can scan the QR code here or follow the link in the chat to join our growing community of safety leaders. Together, we're proving that innovation backed by data and collaboration can drive a safer future. And just thank you again for being a part of this movement. Let's continue putting ideas into action and trying new things for workers and their families and their communities that depend on them. You will receive an exit survey here at the end of the summit as well, and I encourage you to take that to provide your feedback and suggestions. But with that, have a safe rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you all at Congress in the fall.